Thank you so much for joining me for Daily Spark with Dr. Isla. I am your host, Dr. Isla Buster. You know what I like to do on the show. I want to enlighten you. I want to inspire you. I want to empower you to become your best self. Now, Scripture reminds us that the tongue is a small thing that makes grand speeches, but a tiny spark can set a great forest on fire. And today we want to get you fired up about the power of love. I am speaking with author Clark Shelby today, and we're talking about his book, The Power of Love. How love, with God's help, gives you the strength to do things that you thought that you could never do. I know, that's so awesome. Well, let me tell you a little bit more about Clark. He was born in 1936 in Miami, Oklahoma, and attended school in Kansas and Oklahoma. He and his wife, Karen, lived in Springville, Missouri. Now, he has worked for several years for Duncan Industries as a sales and service engineer, director of manufacturing, and then was promoted to vice president of international sales and president of the company. During Clark's tenure as vice president of international sales at Duncan, he was awarded the prestigious President of the United States Excellence in Exporting Award. In order to win this award, you must increase export sales for 3 straight years of 20% or more per year and have sales in at least 3 new countries each year for 3 consecutive years. No easy feat, and that is awesome. Clark spent 5 years as publisher of the Eateries Restaurant and Show Guide for tourists in Bronson, Missouri, publishing up to 100,000 books per year. Clark served in the Kansas Army and Air Force National Guard for more than 6 years before he began traveling in the park industry and was a sergeant in radio communications. Clark and his wife, Karen, spend as much time traveling and exploring places that haven't been and plan to keep doing it as long as their health allows them to. Clark loves writing new novels and plans on, keep doing it, he says. I always hope my books tell a good story. Yes, I have to agree with that. So you know what I'm about to say now. Go on, get comfy, get cozy, get your coffee, perhaps get your tea, because we are about to get started. So good morning, Clark. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
Good morning. I'm very pleased to be here.
Yes, sir. I'm so happy to have you here. I love the title of your book, The Power of Love. Why did you start writing novels at this particular moment in your life as opposed to any other time?
Well, I never thought about trying to write a book until my wife, Pat, my first wife, became paralyzed from an autoimmune disease, and I became her full-time caregiver. But before I retired to take care of her, I was president of a parking operations company. That job required me to do a lot of international traveling since we had parking operations on 4 continents, so I was traveling all the time. After some time taking care of Pat, and when she was resting or sleeping or she didn't need me to be doing something for her, I guess I started feeling like what it must feel like to be in jail. I'd never been there, but I thought it must be something like being a prisoner or something. If you had spent so much of your life traveling the world like I did, you started feeling like you're trapped. So before my job as the president of the parking operations company, I was vice president of international sales for a parking equipment company. I traveled 6 continents and 65 countries. So I needed something to do to keep my mind working, so I began writing CIA novels using places, locations that I'd worked in writing. It really helped me relax and to have the feeling of not being trapped. And in the long run, I think it actually helped me to do a better job of looking after my wife. And then I found out I like writing these stories.
Now, what made you decide to write the book, The Power of Love?
Well, actually, it took me a long time to decide to write this, several years after my wife, Pat, had passed away, before I decided to write this book. And one day it came to me that it was something I actually had to do. I just had to write this story. it seemed to me that God wanted me to do it. I couldn't stop thinking about it until I wrote it.
Yeah. Usually that's the case. If you can't stop thinking about it, then God has really and truly put it on your heart. I have to agree with you on that one. Now, would you say that your book is fiction? Would you say it's nonfiction? It's about your life, or is it kind of a little bit of both?
Well, it's fiction in the fact that I changed the people's names and the locations and places where we lived, and then to protect my family, I guess. I wrote it as fiction, but actually the story is a true life story.
Right. Now I can understand that you do want to change the name so no one is upset that you use them in the book. I do agree with that. So can you tell us a little bit now? I know you can't tell it all because, yes, you have to buy a copy of the book for that. But can you tell us a little bit about what The Power of Love is all about?
The Power of Love tells the story of a couple in the book, is Chance and Ann, who fell in love and got married at 16 years old. And they'd been married almost 50 years when Ann became ill. Then she became totally paralyzed in the fight they had to try to keep her alive. We tried different doctors and hospitals, and after a long struggle, we were able to find a doctor in a hospital that was able to stabilize Ann's condition and gave her some kind of life. And then several years after her autoimmune disease was under control, she'd gone to bed and was sleeping, and the next morning I found she had had an aneurysm in her brain and died the following day. Frankly, after that, Chance was lost. That was my name in the book, and had no idea what he was going to do with his life because Ann had been part of his life since they were 14 years old. And several weeks after Pat had passed away, I got a telephone call from an old friend in the book. It's Susan O'Hare. He had met her years ago in Chicago when she and her husband, Jack, and he worked for the same company. And Chance had rejoined the same company he'd worked for after being away from it for many years. And Chance and Ann moved to what we call Big Springs, Arkansas, where the company's plant was located. And we found that Susan's husband had been transferred to Big Springs from Chicago, and Susan had already retired from the company when she and her husband moved to Big Springs. And after we had moved there, Ann, which is Pat, met Susan at the local newcomers club, and they became very good and close friends. After Susan and her husband, Jack, had been living there for several years, Jack had passed away, and Susan or Karen decided to go to college and get her degree. And when I was hired as the president of a new parking operation company, I was setting up a new office in Big Springs, and I'd asked, and Susan had just got her college degree, and I'd asked, I needed someone to help set up the office for my new company. And since I knew Susan had been the secretary for the president of the old company, I asked Ann if she would contact Susan to see if she would agree to help him get his new office set up and be his secretary.
Right.
And Susan agreed to come to work for him and help get the new office set up. And during all this period of time, Susan and Ann became even closer after that, since I was always gone for weeks at a time. Susan being a widow and with Chance gone so much, she and Ann got together a lot. And after a year and a half after we'd opened the office in Big Springs, my investors in the company wanted to close my office and move from Big Springs into Maryland, where our investors lived.
Right.
And since they supplied the money for the company, we didn't have much of a choice, so I had to close the office in Big Springs, and Susan was out of a job. And so after that, Susan moved to Springfield, Missouri, where she was living when Ann passed away. And then after she had called me that a couple of months after Ann had died, because she had come to visit some of her friends in Big Springs and asked if she could stop by and visit with him. So, of course, she was told that she could please stop by, and he put the coffee pot on since she liked her coffee. excuse me. Susan stopped by my house on her way back to Springfield, and as always, we enjoyed visiting together because we'd worked together, and we'd known each other for over 40 years. And that was before we moved to Big Spring, so they were old friends, but never more than that. Susan had been a widow at that time for over 17 years and never considered dating anyone or getting married. However, this began when she stopped to visit with me. We began visiting and emailing each other and soon found out we'd fall in love and decide to get married. As Susan would say, they dated for 27 minutes and got married in Las Vegas. The power of love tells the story how love can let you do so many things that you never thought you could, such as taking care of a paralyzed loved one and let you find love again. Even if you thought you would never love anyone else, God has his own plans for your life.
That is so true. Oh, I love that story. I love that. Now, the next question I want to ask, because it's almost time for us to go to break, but would you think that your younger self, do you think your younger self would know that you would write this book, the book that you've written now, The Power of Love?
No way. No possibility.
I just love how even though we're doing awesome things in our life, there's usually that certain something that just kind of changes your life for the better. And I love how most authors say, I had no idea this book was inside of me. They might like writing, but they didn't know that this book was inside of them. So I just love that. Now, Clark, it is almost time for us to go to break. So if you would, please, Mr. Shelby, could you tell everyone what is the title of your book one more time, and where can we get a copy?
The Power of Love is available online at Amazon or Barnes & Noble or several places, and most of the bookstores you could order it from without any problems. So that's what my suggestion is certainly the Amazon is probably the easiest one to get this book.
All right. All right, listeners. Now you know where you can pick up a copy of the book. We'll be back right after this.
Discovery. No, just a sec.
What would it look like if we listened more? Could the right voice, the right set of words, bring us all just a little closer? Get us to open up, even push us further? It could, if we took the time to listen. The most inspiring minds, the most compelling stories. Download Audible and listen for a change.
Anne, Camilla, William, and Fred. The four in the Humvee are on a perilous journey, halfway across the country to a tent city near the Mississippi River, a long ways from Boston. Through each bend and turn, they meet some people in need and others who have evil in their souls. Four unlikely heroes in a Humvee on an unlikely trip, the recipe for a captivating story. Grab this book, EMP Casualty by Michael Kravitz.
And we are back. Thank you so much for joining me for Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I am your host, Dr. Angela Butchester. My guest today is author Clark Shelby, and he has written the book, The Power of Love. That's right, we are talking about how the love of God helps you get through those tough times and to give you the strength to do the things that you never thought that you would be able to do. I know many of you are nodding your head saying, yes, God has definitely helped me along the way. But Mr. Shelby, my next question for you is this. In your story, you talk about several different hospitals. Are they the actual hospitals where your wife was treated?
Actually, they are, except for the Big Springs Hospital. I didn't use the name of that or the name of the town we lived in or its hospital.
And I can
Hi
understand
everyone,
just for
Dr. Angela
the
here.
privacy
Did
sake
you
and
know
kind
that
of give
Daily
it
Spark
a
is
little
now
twist.
on
Are
Facebook?
you,
That's right, you can visit with me
speaking of
at
doctors and hospitals and
facebook.com
all of
forward
that,
slash
you also
Daily
talk
Spark with
about
Dr. Angela. I want
several
to know more
doctors in your
about
book
what
as
you're
well.
thinking.
Did
I'd
you
love to know
use their
which
real
interview did you
names,
find the
or
most
were
entertaining
you
or
able
the
to use
most
your
informative.
imagination?
I want to talk to you,
No, I
and I
didn't
want
use the
you to be
doctor's real
able to
names
talk
in
to
my
me.
book at all
Simply
because
visit
I felt that they would
facebook.com
not
forward
like
slash Daily
to be
Spark
put
with
in
Dr.
there like
Angela.
that.
Right. I can definitely understand. And if someone may be asking, well, why are you asking those questions? It's really, really important that when we write about the things that have gone on in our lives, that we do protect those people that we may be touching on or hinting about. We want to make sure that people are able to still live in their privacy, and I love how you have been mindful of that as well. Now, after you had taken care of your wife for several years, she suddenly passed away. How did that make you feel to know that she had passed?
Well, after my wife Pat passed away, I sat in her room and stayed in the hospital for a long time, and then her doctor came in and actually pronounced her death. And I'd given the information to our nurse about which funeral home her body was to be sent to. But because her nurses knew that when she was in the hospital, I'd always given Pat her baths, even when she was in the hospital. So they asked me if I wanted to give Ann her last bath. Hearing the word her last bath, those words were so final about the woman I'd loved and been married to for almost 55 years, I was stunned. And I guess I was in shock, and all I could say was, no, I can't do it. I ran out of her room as fast as I could, and somehow I was able to drive home through the tears in my eyes. And when I got home, I went directly into my office and sat down in my recliner and started yelling at God for letting Pat die. And I continued crying and shouting at God for probably almost an hour. Unbelievable. Then I calmed down and I remembered all the blessings he'd given me in my life. I got down on my knees and asked God to forgive me and to thank him for letting us have almost 55 years together. Yeah. I calmed down some more and I regained myself. I called our two sons and Pat's sister and my brother to let them know that Ann had passed away earlier this morning. Our sons and their families had been with us at the hospital all day, the day before that she died. And I called her Ann's sister who lived in Dallas, my brother who lived in central Kansas, to let them know what had happened.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Just all of the emotions that you go through. But, thank you so much, Mr. Shelby, for sharing how you were human in that moment. And you did, you said you were angry and you kind of fussed and you let it out. But at the same time, you were like, sorry, God, I was having a human moment. Thank you for all of the blessings that you've given to me. What a beautiful expression to go from angry to peaceful again, and knowing that God allows us to do that, and He loves us in each one of those moments. What a moment to share. Thank you so much for that. Now, I understand that not long before your wife died, she asked you to do something. Do you mind sharing that with us?
Well, 2 weeks before Pat died, I'd just gotten everything done for the night. And as I was walking around her bed on my way to mine, I got to the end of her hospital, Pat, and then Pat said, Clark, if something happens to me, I want you to go to Karen. I stopped at the end of her bed. I turned toward Pat and said, Karen, we're way too much alike. Pat never said any more about that to me again. Mm-hmm. And when I told Karen about that, she didn't think the way I said her name was too funny. But I was so shocked for Pat to ask me to go to someone else.
Yeah.
And the other part of this story was that I didn't know until the night before Carrie and I got married. she told me that Pat had, long time before Pat had become sick and paralyzed, they were doing something. They were at a show or something in Branson, I think, and Pat had said to her, "If something happens to me, I want you to take care of Clark." Karen's reply to that was at the time, "No, we're too much alike."
Isn't that something? I love how she was at peace with it in her own way, that she knew that her two favorite people would be okay. I love that. Now, although you thought that you and Karen were too much alike, you found some love in there perhaps some time later, and then you two were married. How did that progress? How did you feel as your love blossomed?
Well, that's what happened, but it didn't take us very long, and we found out we were in love and got married. And although Karen had vowed she would never date because she might fall in love with someone, because she would never wanted to lose another husband, because it was just too hard to go through, and I'd never thought about marrying someone else.
Now, how long had you and Karen been married? And can you tell us a little bit more about that life?
Well, we've been married for 11 years, and we will celebrate our 12th anniversary next month. And so we may be too much alike, but we certainly are very happy together. We've done a lot of traveling all around this beautiful world and been blessed with pretty good health for our age. And we continue to love being together. So I guess Pat knew what it would be good for us to be together, even if we didn't.
Yeah.
So when she asked that, it was pretty unbelievable, but it worked out so well.
What a beautiful ending to the story. I love it. Well, Mr. Shelby, we are at the end of the show. I cannot believe that we are already out of time, but I have so enjoyed my time with you today. If you could please, sir, could you remind everyone one more time, what is the title of your book and where can we pick up a copy?
The Power of Love by Clark Shelby, and Amazon or any of the bookstores can order them. They usually don't stock them, but they're available. And I appreciate my time with you. I enjoyed it very much. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you. And listeners, thank you as well. And as always, I pray that you find God's grace and mercy in all that you do. Until next time, everyone, be blessed in the Lord. Bye-bye.